Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, I'm really grateful that we can be here together in this format. And in this time and every time, may Allah Almighty keep us together in our hearts and minds and spirits. Alhamdulillah, when we are gathered together for dhikr, the remembrance of Allah, and the study of Allah's revealed religion, the angels gather around, surrounding, encompassing about the people who are engaged in this dhikr, and may Allah Almighty, bless us, and may our gathering be blessed as one of those gatherings of dhikr, remembrance of Allah Ta'ala. So we're going to sum up tonight, inshallah, just what we were doing in the previous weeks, and finish up where we were last week, inshallah, where we've been talking about the tools that we have in Islam for adaptability to changing situations. All of these tools were revealed in the Quran and exemplified in the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. And they were used by the scholars from the earliest days, by the imams, the ulama of Islam, to make our universal faith of Islam adaptable to every situation, every time and place. And so we talked about especially the idea of darura, of the urgent necessities, and that those things which are normally not allowed in Islam are allowed in times of when things are forced and there are circumstances beyond your control. And we talked about the rukhs, ash-shar'iyya, and those are licenses that are made by Allah Ta'ala to ease and facilitate the practice of our faith because of certain conditions which make things a hardship. And so the rukhs embody the idea of a taysir, of facilitation and making the religion easy for people to follow. And by making the religion easy and flexible for people, it increases their faith. It gives them peace and tranquility in their hearts. If the faith were to be rigid and hard to follow, people would perhaps out of necessity neglect it or even abandon it. Or they would feel unease in their heart, and they would be easily tempted by shaitan, by the forces of evil, to contradict and deny their faith. And it's part of the secret of success of Islam that it has been able for now the 15th century to adapt and thrive in every situation. And we see that around us today, that although circumstances are very difficult for millions of people, unforeseen circumstances, many forces beyond our control, yet we are again and again finding within our faith, within Sharia and the guidance of Islam, the tools that we need to live our lives fully in Islamic spirituality and practice. And so the last part of this lecture, we began last week, change over time. And this is a fundamental principle in Islam, that time is directed by Allah Ta'ala, and time is the field of change, and Islam adapts to those changing times. Let me find where we left off last week. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La taqulu khaybat ad-dahri, finna Allah huwa ad-dahr." Don't curse time, because Allah Almighty, God Almighty himself is time. And there's another version of this authentic hadith found in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and other sources of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's found in the form of a hadith Qudsi, that is in the words of Allah Ta'ala, as conveyed by Prophet, peace be upon him, in his words, يُؤْذِينِ ابْنِ آدَمْ يُصِبَّ الدَّهْرِ وَأَنَا دَهْرِ. The children of Adam cause me grief. They harm me, they say harmful, distressing words to me, for they curse time, and I myself am time. And as we understand that, as we talked about last week, in these hadith Qudsi, they're often what you would call anthropomorphic. So Allah gives us terms that are relatable to the human being in words and deeds that are actually something in human experience. And it's not meant to be understood as literally the divine reality, but it's something to let us think. And so, of course, the adha is harmful or hurtful words and deeds of a human being. And of course, we cannot cause distress to Allah Ta'ala, but the distress is to the human being who by their words, by cursing God, the curse comes upon them. And so the children of Adam blamed time for their troubles. When we look in Al-Manawi, he explains, لأن الله هو الآتي بالحوادث لا دهر. This is because it is God himself who creates accidents, that is, actions that happen in the world, not time. It's not time that makes something happen. Time is not our creator. It's God Almighty. وَهُوَ خَلَقَكُمْ وَمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. He it is who created you and created your actions, that which you do. And so the Arabs used to attribute every cause, every situation, every accident, every occurrence within time to a dahr or zaman, to the idea of time, as if it were the creator of those actions. And so used to see in poetry that the poets, who were like the media of the day, the poets were what nowadays you call the media, the influencers in the media. So they would make poems complaining to time, why, oh time, why have you taken away my love? Why have you destroyed my dreams and my hopes, etc., etc. And so whenever a bad thing would happen, they blame time and curse time. And so it is not time that produces anything. It is Allah Almighty that produces it. Surah Al-Asr in the Holy Quran, chapter 112, very short chapter, is extremely famous. It's named Al-Asr, which means, in this case, time through the ages. And Imam Shafi'i had a famous saying, if the people would have contemplated this chapter, the wasa'athum, it would have been sufficient for them. That is, if this surah was the only chapter of the Quran that was revealed and people would contemplate it, that would have given them the basic faith of Islam. And so Allah Almighty called as a witness to the truth of this risala, this message, he called Al-Asr. And Asr is the field of time in which the haraka, the movement and motion of al-insan, the human being, takes place. And so time enables motion. If there were no time, everything would be a stasis. It would be still. And so when Allah Ta'ala created time, he created a possibility of change. He created a future. The human being forms a niyyah or intention within their mind. And by the creation of Allah, another moment is created in which we can then strive and commit motion. And so we carry out our intention through motion within time. And of course, that could not exist without time. And so Allah Almighty creates each moment. And Al-Asr, which could be loosely translated as the age, is that stage in which our motions take place. So my time, my Asr, is the time from when my motion began until it finally ceases in this dunya, in this world. That's my Asr. So we say, so there are Asr of people, Asr al-Imam Abi Hanifa, the time of, or the age of Imam Abu Hanifa, or Asr al-Sahaba, the time of the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessing upon him, or Asr al-Dawla al-Umayyah, the time of the Umayyad state, for example. All of those they have a clear beginning and a clear end. And those things are the creation of Allah. It has a beginning and an end. All that takes place within Al-Asr, within that period of time. And the Asr is broken down to specific units or moments, which are the smallest units, and Allah knows what those units are. And almost imperceptibly, those moments pass in our conscious mind when we are thinking about them. Sometimes we think very carefully and observe everything, and the moment drags slowly. And sometimes we're very busy and occupied, or as we would say, preoccupied, and moments pass. Sometimes it seems, for example, that in a blink of an eye, a lifetime has passed because I was occupied and busy. While other times you're bored, you're waiting for some important thing to happen, and you're sitting, and every motion of the clock, every ticking of the clock seems like it takes a long time. So time, which is being perceived in the human mind, is not fixed. It's different. It's relative to your perceptions, relative to your consciousness. But Al-Asr, the time that you live from your first moment until your last moment on this earth, that's your time. That's the age in which you live, in which all of your decisions, your intentions are carried out. And at each moment, another moment is created and brought forth, and then your intentions by the tawfiq of Allah can be carried out. Tawfiq of Allah Ta'ala. Tawfiq means wafaqa, that means two things are in harmony with each other. So any two things, good or bad, they're in harmony, that's called tawfiq. But specifically, or ittifaq, I should say in Arabic, from wafaqa. So those two things which are in harmony are in ittifaq. But when we use the Islamic term tawfiq, which is Islamic term with a specific meaning, it's only used in a positive action. That means I form a positive intention in my mind to do something in harmony with God's will. And God enables me to carry that action out, which is called khair, amal salihat, or righteous deeds. And so that's by the tawfiq of Allah, by Allah's grace and mercy, He enables us to carry out our good intention, and we receive a double reward for that. If we have that good intention, but we do not have tawfiq, we don't have that grace of Allah to enable, to create that action in the future, then we have the reward, the single reward, which we deserve for forming that good intention. That is the intention which is enlightened by the revealed will of Allah Ta'ala, and we intended to carry that out within time, but we didn't have the tawfiq and grace of Allah Ta'ala to let that happen. That's why we're rewarded for that. And then the mercy of Allah Almighty takes place when we form an evil intention. And so the evil intention is when I know what I'm supposed to be doing or saying, but I intend to do something not in harmony with that. And so Allah in His mercy doesn't allow that thing to happen. And so even though I formed an evil intention, I was unable to carry out that evil intention. So Allah's mercy and grace intervened. It did not happen. And that is also accounted as a good deed for the human being. And finally, Allah's justice is manifested when the human being knowingly forms an evil intention. And then in time, the effect of that cause is enabled, is created by Allah Ta'ala, and the human being is enabled to carry out that evil intention. And that is what is called sayya, or an evil deed. And then they receive one evil deed because they formed that evil intention and then they carried it out within time. And so in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, he makes us to understand in Surah Al-Asr that the meaning of Asr is not the late afternoon, the Asr prayer time, but in fact, it is the time which is الزمان الذي يقع فيه حركات بني آدم من خير وشر. It's the time, the field in which takes place motions, harakat, that is actions of the children of Adam, whether good or evil. And so some people think that this chapter is talking about the time of the prayer of Asr, and it is not. It's talking about the ability to do action within time, the motion or harakat. And so harakat is a motion of a particle which in one moment of time was in one position, and in the next moment of time is transposed to a different position. And that couldn't take place without the creation and will of Allah Ta'ala. And so Allah is letting us know that al-asr, al-zaman is wa'a'un lil-a'mal. It is a container for our deeds. Some of us have, by the will of Allah, a large container, a long life, inshallah, a long life in Islam. Some of us have a shorter life. We're not judged by the size of the container. Each of us is given a container that's out of our control. What we're judged by is what we choose to fill that container up with. And so if we have within our little container and we find so much good out there and we fill that container with good, those are good deeds. That's a good judgment, inshallah ta'ala. And our scales will be heavy on the day of judgment. And if our container is large and we're lazy and we fill it up with a little bit here and there of good and maybe a lot of evil, then that's the thing we're going to be judged for, not the size of our life, but what we fill our life with. And so Al-Asr is the field that we carry out the will of Allah Ta'ala, the revealed will, by making choices. And we're not limited in our choices. We're absolutely free to choose good and evil in abundance or not. But whether we carry them out or not, it depends on our choices. Our reward is increased if we carry out those good deeds, but simply learning with the intention of carrying out good, whether that comes to actual fruition or not, itself is good. But when it comes to fruition, then of course the good deed is multiplied 10 times over, 70 times over, 700 times over, with no limit, only with the knowledge of Allah Ta'ala. So Allah calls this time as a witness to the truth of this revelation. And I really can't understand any better witness, because time is the witness for each and every one of us as individuals and as nations and communities. Every nation community also has a time limit, as we said, not just individuals, and they are judged by the choices they made within that time frame between the rise and fall, the peaks and troughs of the asr, of the age of every civilization. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Truly, the human being, al-insan, lafi khusrin, is in loss, in error, in khusran. Everything they do is a failure. So Allah starts out by emphasizing inna, the truth and reality, al-insan, the human being. So the generic human being, male or female, the human being as a whole is at loss. And that is because time is something with a specific beginning and an end. And, every one of us, you maybe feel tired in the middle of the afternoon, and you lay your head on the pillow and have a little nap, and in your head, you're dreaming and having visions of, you could have a vision of a whole life. And it's a few moments of time, and you wake up, it's over, it's gone. And a lot of time, I don't know if it happened to you, you try to hold on to some memory from that dream, and then quickly it just fades. You can't even remember what it was you were dreaming about. So a lot of times, I don't know if that happened to you, I was like having something really cool. And I even thought, oh, I'm about to wake up. I don't want to forget this dream. But you forget. It passes. And that's this life. That's this dunya. And so we were talking about earlier how relative time is. So if you were to look at Hollywood, for example, summers of your school years were half of your life. They were so full of things. Summer seemed endless. And now we're sitting here, we're much older, and that was a fleeting moment of time. It was nothing at all. And all the good movies are about your formative years there, and then somehow you graduate, it's all downhill after that. In Hollywood, like the only cool events that ever happened, maybe a few fairy tales, in castles in some kind of imaginable, imagination of Europe or something. But most of it, you have the Wild West, and then it kind of skips over. There's not much Civil War, a little bit of Civil War in history in the movies. And there's World War II, that takes up about half of history, was World War II. 4 years of the Civil War, that took up a big chunk of it. And then there was this Wild West, that was the rest of history. There wasn't much else. Those were the big events. Hardly anything else happened. And so we look at different periods of time very differently. And in different cultures, they're talking about things in history and actually producing movies and films and serials. And in America, for example, those things never happened at all. And so truly, time is at a loss. Everything you invest, time takes a long time. You plan, you work, you prepare for the future. Suddenly that future comes and it doesn't last very long and it's gone. And everything that you did seemingly is gone. The Quran tells you, pass by the ruins of the ancient civilization. See what was the end of those who denied. And so the reality of the human being is that time ends. As they would say, the whistle blows, time is up. And you got to put down your pencils. You can't write any more answers on the test. It's over. And you're at loss unless, except. And then it gives those exceptions. And so this concept of time is so fundamental to Islam. And the idea that time is the manifestation of the will of Allah and the grace of Allah and the judgment of Allah, His justice, come within this framework of time. And it's the only time of our human halaqa, motion, where we form intentions and then strive to carry them out. The Prophet ﷺ told us that the asdaq al-asma, harith wa hammam, the truest names that human beings would give to themselves in the Arabic language, the truest names, al-harith wa hammam. Al-harith is the one who reaps what he sows. That is, they strive to plant and nurture and reap their actions. And hammam is the one who has hopes and dreams. That is intention. Those are the truest things. The human being is a whole bunch of intentions, hopes and dreams, and hard work, and then reaping what they sow. And those are the two facets of human life that take place within the field of time. In Arabic language, we say about time, asra. So in Surah Yusuf, Joseph is in the prison, and the man who used to work for the Pharaoh comes, and he was the winemaker for Pharaoh, and he saw himself arani asr khamra. So he saw himself squeezing the grape juice out of the grapes to make the wine for Pharaoh. And so asara means that you squeeze out, وَيَسْتَنْبِتُونَ مِنْهُ الْخَيْرِ. So you make the khalasa, you make the concentrated good of that thing. So you have a big old orange or grapefruit or lemon, and you squeeze it out and you get this much juice, but that's the concentrated good and substance in a concentrated natural form that comes out of that fruit. And so everything that is beneficial comes from this concentration. And that's also related to this idea of time. And Allah also talks about the clouds. وَالْمُؤْسِرَاتِ, He calls them mu'sirati, which the rain-bearing clouds, as if they were fruit that you would squeeze out of them the juice, the rain, and Allah knows best. And so all of these meaning are similar, but of course the intended meaning here in this chapter is ad-dahr lima fihi min tanbihu bitasarrufu ila ahwali. Time, especially in relation to the changes and alterations that take place therein. وَمَا فِيهَا مِنَ الدَّلَالَةِ عَلَى الصَّانِعِ. And all of that contains indications of the revelatory nature of time, that it reveals to us about God. That is, Allah talks about his intentions in the Quran as revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One example is chapter 30, Ar-Rum, the ancient Roman Empire. At that time, it was a Christian-ruled empire, ruled from Constantinople, the Eastern Rome. And it ruled over the West too. There was no Western Roman Empire at that time. The books call that the Byzantine Empire because of the Western prejudice. They want to say the true Roman Empire was in the West, but in fact, it was moved by Constantine. The capital was moved to Constantinople, to Istanbul, and that's where it was. And it was extremely powerful, and it ruled also the old Rome for much of the time, and it ruled Europe and West Africa also from Constantinople. In any case, Allah Almighty told that after the Persians had defeated the Rome, that within a certain number of years, that the Romans will indeed defeat the Persians, and that was a promise by Allah. And Allah in the Quran links promises in this life of victories and success, and failures and defeats, and links them with future fulfillment of the promise of Allah Ta'ala. So within time, we see the fulfillment of these predictions. So that's what it's called a nabuwat, or prophecies. And so within the field of time and the possibility of change, we see the intention of Allah Ta'ala carried out in time. When we talked about the maqasid shar'iyya, the higher purposes of Islamic law. And we make changes in Islamic legislation because of forces of time, circumstances that restrict our ability to act. And so Sharia gives us the flexibility. And so maqasid mean, of course, the higher purposes, the goals, the intent of the Sharia. The Sharia is the lawgiver. And the lawgiver is none other than God Almighty. In a secondary sense, you can call the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, Sharia as well, because he instituted Sunnah in harmony with the will of Allah Ta'ala as a human being. And so he can also be called a lawgiver relatively. And you can also use the word tashri'ah or legislation in regard to the adaptation of Islamic law in time by scholars. But the asl, or the original state, is Sharia is divinely revealed. And we only understand it fully in time. And we still have many prophecies in the Quran and in the Hadith were fulfilled in the time of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, in the time of Sahaba, up until even in the Middle Ages. And today we see, as most of us understand, there's almost a consensus about fulfillment of many of these prophecies in our own days. And there are many of them that still await a future time. So we will never 100% understand all of the revelation of Allah Ta'ala until we have seen in time all of those things taking place. So each time circumstances force us to use the tools of adaptation in Sharia, it makes us to legislate in harmony with Allah's revealed will as it is revealed in time. And so when Allah told us that it's forbidden for us to eat al-mayta wa dam wa lahm al-khinzir wa ma uhilla bihi li ghayri Allah, that we don't eat carrion and blood, or as dam al-masfuh, the blood that is poured out, and the meat of swine, pork, or that which is dedicated to idols, and those other forms of meat and foods which are forbidden by Allah Ta'ala. And then he said, except when you are compelled by necessity. So each time in life that necessity compels you, it's actually a fulfillment of the wisdom of tashri'ah, of legislation, which Allah gave us in the Quran. So if you are in a dangerous situation, and so today, for example, in a time of a pandemic, the ulama, almost like one voice, there's no hierarchy, there's no pope, there's no ayatollah or anybody, but the ulama from east to west, north from south, they started guiding the ummah how to respond during a pandemic, how to do prayers in social distancing, what to do in Ramadan, in Taraweeh, and Hajj and Umrah. And people think, oh my God, this is a catastrophe. This is a horrible thing. What a crisis. And of course, those are, people are dying, literally, people are suffering, and it's a difficulty and it's stressful, and that is a crisis. But in fact, from Iman, from the perspective of faith, from the perspective of Sharia, it's an opportunity for us to practice the tools and use these tools that were given to us, the rational tools of adaptability in the Sharia. And so it's a time of legislation. And so the ulama and scholars, when they are issuing their fatwas and their guidance for the ummah based on these sound criteria, it's actually an opportunity for us to appreciate the revelation of Allah in the Quran and Sunnah. And it can only be understood in the realm, in the framework of Al-Asr. Only in this time span in which Allah's will is being carried out. So if we curse, oh, it's a pandemic, I've heard now it's actually a joke to curse 2020. And they have funny jokes and memes out there about 2020, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, that's the same as the Prophet says, don't curse time, ad-dahr, because Allah is ad-dahr. Allah is revealing to us His will for us. It's an opportunity for us to get the grace of Allah and tawfiq, to be in harmony with the revealed will of Allah in this situation, which is unique. Probably it's unique for us in our lifetimes. In different other times in the world, there were, of course, worse crises, but probably in our minds, this is like one of the top 10. But we see it in faith, in Iman, as an opportunity. It's a challenge, as they would say. And we use our rational tools given to us in Revelation to adapt our Sharia to the time that was created by God Almighty. And so you don't have a full understanding of God because you don't have a full knowledge of all time and all the space within Allah's creation. But so every unfolding of time increases our knowledge. Time, as we understand it, is linear. And as we talked about before, if you reverse a film, so you drop a glass off the table, it falls on the floor, you can slow down in slow motion, and it hits and smashes a million pieces. Then you can reverse the film, and the pieces come back together, and they come back up, and they reform in a perfect thing. But all of us laugh at that, and we understand that that doesn't happen within time, within al-asr. That's something that could only be by the power of Allah. But in this framework of time, it's a one way. You don't get a second chance to go back. As the unbelievers on the Day of Judgment, they say to Allah, let me go back in time, go back to my old life, and then I'll do good. But there's no do-over, there's no reverse. You can't rewind, as we used to do with a tape, and see it over again. And so we can't get the fullness of knowledge except with the fullness of the line of time. And so our asr is limited, and we're in khusr and failure because we had a certain beginning, lots of things happening, and I wasn't a witness. And then there's going to be an ending, and I'm not going to see how everything came out after me. I only have that time to use the tools, and therefore the Quran is here to tell us what we need to know about the beginning and what we need to know about the end. And then we're responsible for the time in the middle. And so that's where it's important for us to know, in al-insan, every male, every female, rich and poor, whoever they are, the human being, their actions are lost. They work hard within the framework of time, this life that they have, however long or however short. And every one of us has hard work. It doesn't matter whether you're an emperor or a billionaire. When you're in the hospital bed with pneumonia or something, and every breath you take is hard, and whatever happened, the human being has to go through. We were born in the pangs of birth, and we die with the pangs of death. And so there's a hardship for every human being, and you have to make those choices, and then the time ends. Illa, with the exception. Alladina amanu, those who have iman. Iman, amina, that which is trustworthy and secure. So when I'm afraid of losing my valuables, I have to secure them. Make sure they are not lost. And so when you're traveling, they tell you, make sure you secure your luggage, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't, and they're lost, it's gone. And so every human being is going to lose their luggage, literally and figuratively, unless they secure it. And Iman is the security for your actions. You make choices based on faith, and with the grace of Allah, you carry them out, and they're multiplied as good deeds. And by the grace of Allah, they're not carried out, and they still are rewarded as single good deeds, inshallah. And so the human being with Iman, they're able to make informed choices based on the reality of God, the divine reality, which is revealed in the Quran and which is confirmed within time. And so from the Quran, from the beginning to the end, Allah gives us examples from time, from history, from natural history, from the civilizations of the past and individuals, and prophecies of what is going to happen in the future based on your human choices. So you have the guidance within that framework. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, carry out those good deeds within the framework of time. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, from al-wasiyah, that you advise each other. So at-tawasaw, that they advise one another, mutual advice, supporting each other, advising and directing each other to sabr, patience in al-adha, and patience in ibadah. Patience al-adha means enduring difficulty, stress, bad things that happen to all of us that we don't like, but that doesn't negate our faith. We hold on to our faith and belief, and we continue to form intentions to carry out the demands of our faith, our duty to our Creator, depending on our abilities within the framework of time, our ability to put into motion our plans and intentions in harmony with the law of Allah Ta'ala and with the grace of Allah and tawfiq, that they would be carried out within time. And so we have a sabr al-adha, and a sabr al-ibadah, by patiently worshiping, or al-ta'a, in obedience to God. That is, as a Muslim, you're required to do things which are sometimes difficult, but they're not impossible for you to do, not harmful for you to do. And within the flexibility of Sharia, you carry those out to the best of your ability. And so when you're in your home, you pray 4 rak'ahs of Dhuhr or Asr or Isha. When you're on the road, you pray 2 rak'ahs, and that's one of the rukhsas, one of the license and facilitation which you get from Sharia. When you're ill or in pain, you pray lying down or sitting down, and you may, in bad health, be paralyzed and unable to bend, but you're praying in your heart and mind, maybe bowing by blinking your eye during the bowing and prostration. You eat what is halal when it's available for you. When it's not available and you're starving or you're in danger, you eat and are thankful for Allah, whatever Allah can provide for you. All of those are the taysir, the facilitation of Islam. So that's worshiping Allah through time and being patient in sticking to Islam. And so if Islam were something rigid and not adaptable to time and the changes of time, then you might give it up. But there's no excuse, since in every situation in life, Islam has advice for you to follow in your life. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, that you cooperate together, mutually support each other in doing the truth, in following the truth, and understanding and learning and carrying it out. And you do that with patience in hardship and difficulty, and patience in continuing your worship of Allah Ta'ala, forming the intention, and then with the tawfiq of Allah, grace of Allah Ta'ala, carrying out the will of Allah Ta'ala in this life. And so our deeds which are done for the sake of Allah, sincerely, with ikhlas, for the sake of Allah, they're not lost. In fact, as Allah said, Kul man alayha fan, everything on this surface of the earth, everything in the world shall pass away. What only remains is that which is done for the sake of Allah Almighty. That which is done for the sake of Allah remains forever. That which is done for any other purpose, not dedicated to Allah Ta'ala, it passes away with this earth. So every day I eat a meal, and it passes through my system and it's gone. But if I intended by that to have a ta'a and obedience to Allah Ta'ala, to carry out my work for the sake of Allah, to be hammam and harith, to reap and to sow, to intend and to carry out for the sake of Allah, then it's amal salihat and righteous deeds, which remain forever and ever for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, and everything else passes out with this life. Just as your meal of yesterday is long gone, you either used it for good or you used it for evil. And so Islam is always flexible and adaptable. It always changes. That's why it's eternal and universal, because it's the will of Allah that it will be revealed in the creation of time over the asr, over that framework, that span of activity in which we find ourselves. And so the person who thinks, oh, I'm a conservative, I'm orthodox or a fundamentalist, and I do everything exactly as it was done by Abdullah bin Umar or Abu Hanif or something, that's not true. You don't. Each one of them carried out the Sharia of Allah Ta'ala in their time as they were able to do and understood. They used the tools revealed to us in the Quran and Sunnah to carry out their mission. And it's our job to carry that out in our time. And the wisdom of Allah is only revealed to us in our time. It can't be revealed to us in a future beyond our time, and it can't be revealed to us in a past that no longer exists. Just like that movie, you can't really in reality reverse. You and I can't go back in time to the time of Omar or the time of Uthman or Ali or anyone else and live that time. By the wisdom of Allah, we're in this time. So we don't curse it, we accept it, and we accept it as an opportunity, as a challenge with difficulty sometimes. It requires patience and endurance, a sabr. And though we form those intentions, everyone who forms those intentions for the sake of Allah, even if we're not able to fulfill all of our goals in this time, they are eternal, because whatever is done for the sake of Allah is eternal, liwajhi Allahi ta'ala, for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, and those actions will be there for us, waiting for us, the reward in eternity. But we form our goals and try to carry them out to the best of our ability in our time. And people in the past, they had their action, we have our action. The next generations in the future, they will be responsible for themselves. We're responsible now to pass on to the next generation as best we can this world that we have inherited, to use it in response to the will of Allah Ta'ala. May Allah Almighty bless you and your family and everyone today and every day, and preserve and protect us in the Muslim Ummah. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum.